of our voids, our missing parts that we're too proud or too humble to admit that you see in others, have a feedback mechanism inside us to yearn, to want to express an integration of those parts, those personas, into our true being. The topic today is going to be on your greatest challenges and how they can be turned into your greatest gifts. Your greatest voids can turn into your greatest values. So if you have something to write with and write on, you might want to keep up with me. If not, type. But there's no way I can do justice to this topic without discussing values. So if you've heard something about values from me before, just know that would be a little bit of a reminder initially here. Every individual lives by a set of priorities, a set of values. And whatever is highest on their set of values, the thing that's most important, most meaningful, most inspiring, that they spontaneously love doing, this is the area where they have the greatest potential, the greatest drive, the greatest intrinsic yearning to want to express and to master things. Things go down the list of values, and things that are less important and less priority, those things require extrinsic motivation to get you to do things, and you need to be reminded to do them or motivated to do them. And if you need motivation to do what you say is important, it's not really important to you. Motivation is a symptom, never a solution for human beings to master their lives. I don't need motivation to research and teach. But something low in my values like cooking and driving, I would need a motivation. Now, anytime you're looking at life and living according to what's valuable to you, you are more objective, more neutral, more balanced in your orientation. Because in that area, you're willing to embrace both pain and pleasure in the pursuit of things. And therefore, you have a more objective view. Objectivity means neutral-minded. And you're willing to embrace the pains, pleasures, supports, the challenge, the ease, the difficulties, the two sides of life that life has to offer. But when you're in your living in lower values and attempting to do something you think is important, but it's not really important, something you may have injected from some outer authority or tradition or convention around you, or mother or father or somebody on the outside that told you got to do this, and you're having to live by duty instead of internal design. You now, because of the unfulfillment, instead of living in your forebrain and your executive function and your inspired state, you tend to go into your amygdala and hindbrain and despired state. And as a result of it, you have unfulfillment, and you try to avoid challenge and seek ease. You want to avoid pain and seek pleasure, and you activate the amygdala, which is the survival, you might say, center, the desire center, to avoid challenge and seek opportunity or seek support. And what is the result of that is you tend to have a one-sided view. You tend to be polarized in your perspective. A subjective bias state occurs. And when you have a subjective bias state, you distort your reality. Right now, we're seeing a lot of that in the news dealing with this COVID issue. We've seen a lot of subjective biases. Governments trying to impose vaccination, non-vaccinators trying to impose that. Both are biased and subjective in their views, not really giving all the facts and getting opinions to get people to motivate to do things instead of actually objectively looking at all the things and making people aware, you might say. As a result of it, we're in a more survival mentality, a more polarized view and reactionary state. And whenever we do, we tend to have emotions that are incompletely aware. Let me give you an example. Whenever you're seeking something that you're infatuated with, you're conscious of the upsides and unconscious of the downsides. And the unconscious ignored downsides become a void. And when you're resentful to something or avoiding something or a predator that's coming at you and you're trying to run from it, you're conscious of the downsides, unconscious of the upsides. And again, you're now ignorant of the upsides, and that ignorance and that is a void. It's called missing information. And anytime we have subjective biases and we're actually polarized in our perspectives and highly emotional, particularly in absolutes like high moral absolutes, you can guarantee ignorance and missing information, which by definition is called entropy or disorder in life. And so anytime we're not living by our highest values, we have a disordered state. And the disordered state is this infatuation, resentment, seeking and avoiding, prey and predator, pleasure and pain oscillation, which is uncertain and unstable and emotional, and basically are not our more advanced part of our thinking process, but more of our emotional banal state of consciousness. As a result of it, the part we're ignoring becomes a void. When we're infatuated with somebody, as we're conscious of their upsides and unconscious downsides, we tend to be unconscious of our upsides. When we're infatuated with them, we become unconscious of our upsides and conscious of our downsides. We put them on a pedestal, we minimize ourselves, and now we're too humble to admit what we see in them inside us, and we have a missing part, and that's a void. And when we're looking down on somebody and resenting somebody, and we're conscious of downsides and unconscious upsides, we become conscious of our upsides and unconscious of our downsides, and self-righteous to look down on them, and too proud to look and admit that what we do and what we see in them is inside us. Anytime we're too humble or too proud to admit what we see in others inside us, we have created a void, a disowned part, something we're ignoring in ourselves, just like we're ignoring the downsides when we're infatuated, and we're ignoring the upsides and we're resentful. So anytime we judge, we create incomplete awareness. We have a subjective bias. We look up or down at people, put them on pedestals or pits instead of putting them in our hearts. We don't have reflective awareness. We have deflective awareness. We're too proud or too humble to admit, or too humble to proud to admit what we see in them inside us. Those are called voids, and those voids want to be fulfilled. And why do we want to have those fulfilled? Because we want to be able to love. When I ask people by the millions around the world, how many of you want to be loved and appreciated for who you are? Every hand goes up. And how many want to make a difference? Every hand goes up. Because you make a difference by being authentic. And the way you're authentic is by living by your own priorities and values in life. And when you live by your highest priority, you're most objective, you're most balanced. You see things on both sides. You're less ignorant, more aware. That's why they call it objective truth, and subjective bias is lack of truth, or there's more partial and not complete in awareness, missing information. And the moment we see things on both sides and we have neutral mindedness and we're able to love somebody, which I call, and embrace both sides, we get to be authentic. As long as we're too proud or too humble to admit what we see in others inside us, we're not authentic. And we want to be loved for who we are, but we can't be who we are if we're not balanced. So anytime we judge somebody and put them on a pedestal or pit, we put ourselves in the pit or on the pedestal in compensation, and that is not who we are. Those are personas and masks and facades we're wearing instead of the authentic self. And we have a yearning to want to express our authentic self. We have a desire to be loved and appreciated for who we are. We have a desire to live that way. We want to be loved that way. We want to be able to do that. So all of our voids, our missing parts that we're too proud or too humble to admit that you see in others, have a feedback mechanism inside us to yearn, to want to express an integration of those parts, those personas, into our true being. And that authentic self is an opportunity from the challenge, you might say. The void becomes the opportunity. And so the opportunity, which originally opportune means to sail into harbor safely with the winds blowing you. That means you're in the flow, you're in the zone and being guided by the winds of opportunity. So whenever you're basically living authentically, you automatically awaken your empowered and true and authentic state. This is where we're in the flow. We're blowing the winds. Our human will matches divine will in theological terms. And free will matches divine destiny, if you will, in that case. But the second we judge and weigh ourselves down and have incomplete awareness and subjective bias and missing information and disorder and uncertainty, those states automatically create voids, and those voids want to be fulfilled, and those voids drive values. And the word fulfillment means filling full the mind that has got something missing and empty. That's why the most fulfilling thing you can ever do is live by your highest values where you're most objective. And the most unfulfilling you can do is live by lower values where you're most subjectively biased and judging. You have the most emotional instability when you're living by lower values. You have the most objective thinking process and reason when you live by your highest values. One is literally the hindbrain, one's the forebrain. The forebrain guides you and allows you to see and you might say become prophet of your destiny, master of your destiny. And the other one makes you victim of history. Why? Because Anything that you are infatuated with or resent will keep occupying space and time in your mind and keep regurgitating and running around like the old Buddhist karmic wheel, will just keep running around in your cycles of your mind as brain noise and incomplete awarenesses and missing information until you have fulfillment and see the whole. All the parts are striving to make whole. And so every time you're not living authentically because of judgment and minimizing and exaggerating yourself and other people, you automatically are creating those voids that want to be fulfilled. The early Gnostics in the 2nd century AD were a Christian group that basically called the fulfillment of the soul the thing called pleroma, and the emptiness of the senses, the things called kenoma. And I've been stating for many years that at the level of our soul, the state of unconditional love, where we're not judging, nothing's missing, because there's nothing. We're not too proud or too humble to admit that we have everything. We have everything. We see it. And whenever you're living by lower values and you're judging, but in the senses, which deal with contrast, you now think there's things missing. There's actually nothing missing. When I was in Nepal, I met with the Bonpo Lama there, and we had a conversation for over an hour, just about an hour, on the idea that nothing's missing. And he was saying in his beautiful English he says that it's so interesting how people think there's something missing, but actually nothing's missing. It's just your awareness. You're not asking the quality questions. You know, I teach a program called the Breakthrough Experience, and I developed a method called the Demartini method, which is a series of very high quality questions that are designed to make you fully conscious, mindful, if you will, mindfulness, pleromic, fulfilled, grateful, grace, human will matches divine will, in that state, by asking questions that allow you to neutralize those ignorances. You know, your intuition is constantly trying to help you become cognizant of what you're unconscious. Whenever you're conscious of the upsides and unconscious of the downsides, your intuition is trying to whisper the downsides to you to calm down the infatuation, which distracts you. We've all had infatuations in our life. Then we notice that we're preoccupied by them. We go to bed at night when we're highly infatuated, it's hard to sleep. And if we're highly resentful, the same thing. We get noise in the brain. This noise, this cacophony, this entropy, this breaking down, this uncertainty that's in the brain is a symptom and a feedback mechanism to let us know we're not living by priority. It's a feedback to guide us to our authentic self. Whatever is highest on our value or our ontological identity revolves around, our teleological purpose revolves around, and the level of fulfillment goes up. In fact, our self-worth is maximal to the degree that we live by the highest value. So all of the symptoms of our psychology are just feedback mechanisms that are being intuitively guiding us back to our authentic self, where we're maximizing our potential. And so that's why I'm sharing this idea here, because the values in our life are a byproduct of our voids, and our voids are based on our judgments. Empedocles, the Greek philosopher, said that there was love and strife, and the human being can see things integrated where the elements are integrated and it sees the whole and it's nothing missing, or it can miss parts and have disintegration and have strife. And that was 2,500 years ago, and it's still the same wisdom today. And it's interesting, in my own life, I can vouch for this idea. When I was a young boy, when I was first born, about a year and a half old, I was trying to walk and everything else, and I kept falling over, and I ended up having to wear braces on my leg because my leg was turned in. And so as a result of it, I had a constraint from these braces on my arm and leg. Both my arm and leg were turned in. So as a result of that void and that judgment I had about, comparing myself to other people, they had seemed to have more freedom than I did. That judgment was lingering in my consciousness until age 4, when I finally got out of my braces. And then I wanted to be on the go. I want to prove that I could run. And really, I've been on the run most of my life. I travel all the time. I don't like being constrained. I live around the world. And that void had an impact on my value. I was also speech impeded. I had a speech impediment. I had speech problems. And again, about a year and a half old, I was going to a speech pathologist and sticking buttons and strings in my mouth and pulling and exercising muscles and things. And that led to speaking. And then in first grade, I was told I would never be able to read and write properly because my hand was turned in, so I wrote backwards, and I had dyslexia. And they said, never read or write, never communicate effectively, never go very far in life, probably never amount to anything. That void and that judgment relative to the other kids were voids that I had to work through in my life to to realize it, but they are exactly the things that I needed at the time to do what I'm doing today. I went on to, read voluminously, 30,500 and something books. I've traveled nearly 20 million miles. I've become a multimillionaire. I've been around the 154 countries speaking. The very voids I have are the very values that I had as a result of it, drove me to have fulfillment, to be myself. So just know that the various challenges that you face in life, the various voids that you face in life are actually your gifts. I would say that anything that you can't say thank you for is baggage, but anything you can say thank you for is fuel. I'm very grateful that I had a deformed arm and leg now. Now I couldn't speak everything else because, gosh, that's what I get to do today. And I love doing what I do. And it's inspiring. And so your voids will determine your values. Your challenges will determine your opportunities and your gifts in life. My gift, which is really not really a gift, it's just a lot of hours put into speaking and traveling and reading and everything else to compensate, becomes the gift, as you call it. I don't like the word gift necessarily, but what we've called the gift in people's lives. It's usually thousands of hours of work on things to transcend choices that you had and judgments you had. I've seen people that had health issues become great doctors. I've seen sports people who were hindered and had health issues and sport limitations, physical limitations, become great sports people to compensate, to conquer it. So your challenges in life aren't setbacks. They're actually opportunities to go forward in life. And so I just wanted to make sure I covered that idea, because a lot of times we sit there and we think that somehow there's a mistake, but actually it's a gift that way. And so if you haven't taken the time to go through and look at all the challenges you faced in your life and things you think, are in the way, look at them carefully. That's on the way. I think right now I wouldn't be here on Zoom right now if it wasn't for Corona, probably. I may, but I probably wouldn't have done it as efficiently and as fast as I could. So St. Corona opened up the doorway for me to reach you right now. So the challenge became the opportunity. And as a result of it, I've now reached people in countries I've never been able to reach that are sitting in the comfort of their own home and actually in their comfort of their own casuality. And they can sit there and do that at breakfast, lunch, or dinner, no matter what time of day it is. We have people all over the world today. So it's very interesting how the void became the value, the challenge became the opportunity, the setback became the step forward. And I think that it's wise to stop, and anything that you think that you can't say thank you for, make a list of it, and anything that you think is a mistake, anything you're highly infatuated with or highly resentful to, it's wise to find the other side. Because the second you see both sides and you get objective, that's when you have the most power. Fantasies are goals that have one side and don't have both sides. Objectives are things that have both sides. And I'm a firm believer in not wasting your time on fantasies. So what happens is if you have a judgment and you have an incomplete awareness, and your intuition is trying to point out the other side to bring it back into balance, so you can be mindful, so you can have fulfillment, so you can be inspired by what it is. Because when you have it fulfilled, you're mindless when you're ignoring half of it. You're mindful when you're seeing both sides of it, and you're inspired, and you're despired when you're seeing one side. Because if you're infatuated with something, you're going to want to change you relative to others, which is futile. When you're resentful to something, you want to change them relative to you, which is futile. So you live in futility whenever you're judging and you're having imbalanced perspectives and subjective biases, and you live in utility and of service to people, which is the most fulfilling when you make a contribution to people's lives. I'm a firm believer that if you're not doing something that's equitable, that's sustainable, that's a fair exchange, that is a contribution to other people, you're not going to get it out of narcissism fulfillment. You're not going to get it out of altruism. You're going to get it out of a fair exchange that's sustainable, that is economically measured and transacted, that allows you to go out and do something extraordinary that makes a difference in people's lives. And that's when you take your voids and fill them with value. And also you take the same in other people. Whatever they perceive as missing, if you can fulfill that, you have a sustainable contribution, a business. And so that's what we're all doing. Everybody is helping others fill their values. And I think that that's what makes self-worth. If you study axiology, the study of value and worth, when we actually are able to fulfill our values and at the same time fulfill other people's values, we have maximum self-worth. And if we do, we don't exaggerate ourselves with narcissism or minimize ourselves with altruism. We actually have sustainable fair exchange, where we have a fair exchange, a complete equity. Equity theory shows this. So the willingness to actually go inside and ask the questions that equilibrate the mind and liberate you from the bondage of the things that occupy space and time in mind, the infatuation, resentments, and actually get really focused on what it is that's really important to you, the highest priority. This is the key. Yeah, I mention in almost every talk I do about how important it is to live by priority. But when you fill your day with high priority actions that inspire you, that your day doesn't fill up with low priority distractions that don't. And when you have low priority distractions, you have entropy and aging. And when you're doing high priority things, you have negentropy and life and youth. You actually feel youthful. You have youth stress, not distress. So it's so important to fill your day with the highest priority actions you can and make the biggest contribution you can to yourself and other people in a fair exchange in order to do that. When you do, you'll have objectivity, you'll have wisdom, you'll have mindfulness, you'll have fulfillment, and you'll have the power of, a nonstop momentum and enthusiasm. I tend to say there's 7 transcendental states that occur the second you're objective and you're living by priority. You're grateful for your life. You love what you're doing. You're inspired by the vision that emerges in your mind. You're enthusiastically working on it. You feel certain about that as a destiny, and you feel present. You're not living in anxieties of the future and guilts of the past. You're present and remorses of the past. You're right there. And that's where you actually maximize your potential in human behavior. And that's what I've been interested in all these years, 49 years, on how do you maximize human awareness and potential? And that is by living by highest priority and realizing the voids in your life that have accumulated, and then using those voids as a driving mechanism to find value. Your highest value fulfills the greatest amount of voids or the greatest amount of value because it's the most objective. And when you're most objective, you're most neutral, most loving, most soulful, most mindful, most pleromic. And you're in that process, you're transcending the judgment. Think about the days you get the highest priority things done in your day, the highest priority things done. And you feel like you're on top of the world. You had an agenda. You knocked it out of the ballpark. You got the highest priorities. You came home and you could handle almost anything. But if you imagine a day that you felt like you were doing low priority things and you went down to your amygdala, you were out of your executive center, and you went in there and you felt like, wow, what a day. You feel like instead of you on top of the world, you feel like the world's on top of you. You're in the underworld in a hell of a day. And so the overworld, which is a heaven of a day, you're kind of like an animal reacting with predator and prey mentality instead of an angel looking down as a messenger of enlightenment for people. And so as a result of that, you automatically go into your amygdala in that state. And then you end up being a bear when you come home. And then you tend to have a chain reaction of emotions and projections onto people. And then you end up taking it out on people because of the projections of your own judgments inside yourself. So it's so important to prioritize your day on a daily basis and live by priority. If you're not filling your day with highest priority actions that inspire you, days designed to fill up with low priority distractions that don't, to kick your butt, to get you reminded to go back to authenticity. Every symptom in your life, physical symptom, psychological symptom, sociological symptom, business symptom, family symptom, all of them are feedback mechanisms to guide you as voids, to guide you back to the highest priority value, authentic state, so you can maximize your potential. If you learn to see things on the way that way and ask, how is whatever's happening helping me fulfill what I value most, you'll increase the probability of having fulfillment and youthfulness and life and entropy instead of entropy and breaking down. And I think that the body is creating the symptoms to guide you that way. If it's interpreted properly, instead of getting rid of symptoms with a drug, it's wise to learn from the symptoms and live wisely and live by priority. I've seen people in my breakthrough experience program, which I've taught 1,132 times around the world. I've seen people heal, physiologically heal various types of illnesses right in front of us in the program, sometimes in that day and sometimes the next days that come on, because they finally got really clear about what they really, really are committed to doing in life, what their real priority is, what their real highest value is, which I do in the program, what their real mission is, and give themselves permission to do that and to delegate lower priority things and to say yes to the things that are really most objective and important and get a more objective view and not fantasies that are compensation for unfulfilled highest values. Addictive, consumer-based, consumptive and compulsive and impulsive and addictive behaviors are compensations for unfulfilled highest values. And they're basically striving for that which is unobtainable and trying to avoid that which is unavoidable, which is a source of many, many people's sufferings. So if you want to get past the suffering game and want to get on to the fulfillment game, you want to live by priority and realize that your voids from all your judgments are nothing more than imbalances of perspective, trying to find a balance. And when you live by your highest priority, you get that balance back. That's why I teach people that in the Breakthrough Experience and in my values training program. Whatever, every program I'm doing what I can to try to give you that awareness. You deserve to live an extraordinary life. The ordinary person subordinates to other people, puts people on pedestals, or judges people with hypocrisies, and basically sits there and gets caught in the judgment, creating voids all the time, but not realizing those voids are there to be fulfilled as feedback, and they're not taking advantage of the opportunities of the gifts that they're given by the challenges they're creating. But it's just perceptual. We have control of our perception, decisions, and actions. And if we take command of our perceptions in such a way that we see both sides of things by intuitively asking the questions of what we're ignorant of to see the whole, we liberate ourselves from those bondages, those misperceptions, and get on with doing something extraordinary. So I just want to take the time to go over that and just share that with you today, because I really believe that your challenges in your life are your gifts. Your voids are your values, and the things that you think that are in the way are actually on the way. And as a result of that, I'd like to also give you access to a free masterclass. It's time to access your 7 greatest powers. It's a free masterclass. It helps you wake up your natural genius and to take advantage of the voids that you've had in your life. And so it's a really cool masterclass on that process. And these principles that I'm going to share in that class, just like today, are going to be things that I've been working on for the last 49 years and standing on the shoulders of great minds and great literature, and also clinically working with thousands and thousands of people. So if you're ready to do something extraordinary with life, please prioritize your life. Take advantage of this masterclass. And I look forward to seeing you there. You can just sign up at that link that you've got seen there below. And this is Dr. Demartini. I just wanted to share my weekly tidbit, habit, or whatever that you can take on for the week. And please take advantage of these principles. And if you know somebody that can benefit from these little classes, please share the message and let them know, link to them so they know about these classes, because every week you get a little inspirational gem that can make a difference for the week, and focus on that for the week. You deserve to have something in your life. You deserve to be, do, and have what you love in life. There's no reason why you can't.